If every country is in debt, then who is the creditor? Let's take a closer look at the answer to this question together. Almost every country in the world is living in debt today. The United States currently has more than $38 trillion in debt. The European Union carries nearly $14 trillion, and Japan has around $9 trillion in debt. Oil-rich countries, export powerhouses, none of them are outside this picture. If we stop and think for a moment, if everyone is in debt, then who does everyone owe? This is where financial history comes into play. This is the point where money, power, and history come together. And I should say this from the very beginning. This system is not as simple as it looks. It is far more complex. Debt is not just a burden. In fact, it forms the skeleton of the modern world. Wars, crises, economic booms, and collapses, all of them are built on top of this invisible system. And as we follow the trail of debt, some striking realities emerge. The world is not indebted to anyone in particular. In a sense, it is indebted to itself. But it would be wrong to say that everyone gets an equal share of this cycle. Today, total global debt has exceeded $315 trillion. That figure is nearly 3 times the size of the global economy. So how did we get here? The answer lies centuries in the past. The idea of national debt did not originate on Wall Street, as many assume. It was born on the battlefield. In 1694, while England was at war with France, it was on the verge of running out of gold. The king found a solution in the merchants of the time. He borrowed money from them. In return, he promised regular interest payments funded by future tax revenues. To manage this system, the Bank of England was established. For that era, this was revolutionary. It meant that the state could now spend money it had not yet earned. And the lenders gained something extremely valuable: the promise of the state. That promise could be bought and sold. This is how government bonds were born, laying the foundations of the modern financial system. The French adopted this system. The Dutch refined it. And the Americans used it to finance both their War of Independence and their westward expansion. Over time, debt ceased to be seen as a sign of failure. On the contrary, it became a measure of credibility. If a state could borrow, it was a strong state. In the past, kingdoms and empires conquered land for gold. Today, they issue bonds for interest. Battlefields have been replaced by balance sheets. In the present day, the picture becomes even clearer. Debt has become the world's largest product. Every country has debt. Every bank is a creditor. And every individual, through taxes, pension funds, and savings, simultaneously holds both debt and claims. So, who actually holds this debt? Let's look at the United States. Because American debt is no longer just a national issue, it has become a global one. Nearly half of its $38 trillion in debt is held by investors. The majority of these investors are American institutions: banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve. The portion held by foreign entities amounts to roughly $9 trillion. The largest holders are Japan and China. But the striking fact is this: most of America's debt is still owned by America itself. Americans pay taxes. Those taxes are used to pay interest. And that interest flows back into Americans' pension accounts. So the debt is real, but the creditors are essentially the system itself. This cycle is not unique to the United States. It is a global chain. Countries hold each other's debt instruments. Everyone trusts someone else's promise. It is very much like a game where everyone is exchanging chips with one another. And the game continues as long as no one leaves the system. But at the very heart of the system, there is a powerful actor: the markets. Behind the scenes of government bonds stand massive funds, central banks, and institutions managing trillions of dollars. They determine who can borrow cheaply and who will struggle. When trust disappears, the consequences are far more destructive, as seen in Greece, Argentina, and Sri Lanka. When debt becomes unpayable, the system intervenes immediately. But the cost of that intervention is usually paid by the people. And what is interesting is this: even after collapses, the system does not stop. Old debts are restructured. New debts are added. The machine keeps going without pause, right where it left off. Because today, debt does not exist to be repaid. It exists to be rolled over continuously. Governments never plan to eliminate debt. They only plan to manage it. Interest is the fuel of this system. Trust is what keeps the engine running. The United States will never fully eliminate its debt. Japan has not paid it off for decades either. And yet, the system continues to function smoothly. Because government debt is considered the safest asset in the world for investors. If those debts were paid off, the system would collapse. That is why debt functions like the heartbeat of capitalism. Regular, systematic, and constant. When politicians say they will eliminate debt, it sounds appealing. But the real goal is not to eliminate debt, it is to preserve belief in it. Because once belief disappears, numbers no longer matter. Perhaps this is where the real issue lies. Debt does not only move between countries, but also within societies. Interest tends to flow upward, and as debt grows, inequality grows with it. Creditors are not villains. Debtors are not entirely innocent either. They are two sides of the same card. But the system collapses if new debt can no longer be created. That is when the question truly emerges. Who does the debt belong to? The answer may be uncomfortable. All of us. And all of us are part of this system. If this narrative has given you a different perspective, stay tuned for more. Because history has already written the answer. You just need to know where to look.